Well, thank you all for joining me today. I'm so excited to be hosting this event. My name is Benji. My geocaching name is Benj59. I live in Highlands Ranch and had the pleasure of meeting Doug, KenyanSherpa, a couple of months ago at one of my CETO events, and I'd heard of him but had never met him. And so when I saw that he was going to be attending my event, I got very excited to meet him and hear a little bit about his story. I ended up hearing probably about 10 to 15 minutes of his story, and then the trash was calling, so we just ended up kind of going our separate ways to follow the trash. But then I contacted him a couple of weeks after that and asked if he would be so gracious as to tell his story, because I just find it incredibly fascinating, and I'm sure you all will as well, which is why you're here. And he has been gracious enough to put together a slide deck and to present on his experiences. Kind of with leading up to Everest and climbing Everest, and just it sounds like a fascinating life story even outside of the Everest experience. So yeah, again, please ask as many questions as you want at the end, and thank you all for attending.
Can we bring the lights down a little bit? Is that possible? First of all, thank you, Benji, for a gracious introduction. And a lot of you know, well, some of you know the whole story. A lot of you know parts of the story. A lot of you probably didn't realize that this guy that's just the same as everybody else walking around has a story to tell. But I do. It's a bit intimidating because here amongst my peers, probably 90% of the people in this room are far better cachers than myself. There's even a few climbers that are much better than myself. Steve Martin back there in the back. But anyway, I will go through my part, and feel free to, if I can say, if it's urgent, ask a question. Otherwise, we can hold off. This is way up on the summit ridge of Mount Everest, and those peaks that are down, that's a cloud cover in the valley, but those peaks above there, they're all above 20,000 feet. So that gives you a little perspective of where we're at. Always dedicated to Jimmy Flowers. Jimmy was a great friend of mine, worked at the Olympic Committee with me, died on the descent from Capitol Peak back in 2009. So anyway, his ashes are up there. His ashes are on a lot of great peaks as well. You can see I'll have a few quotes in there, so hopefully that won't bother you too much. But this is one of the things I've always told my team when I was both coaching as well as working at the Olympic Committee is have big dreams, plan them well, work hard for them, and the miracles will start to happen when those dreams are more powerful than your fears. So for me, why Everest? You've heard that, yeah, because it's there, George Mallory, that whole bit. But for me, I had the pleasure of working with some of the greatest athletes on the planet, and we were always asking them to get outside their comfort zone, push themselves, work hard, really challenge themselves. So I thought, am I up to that? Is that something I can do? And that's kind of what made me think. I'd read all the books starting when I was a teenager, studied it, and I thought, maybe this is just a pipe dream. But then it was like, well, is it or not? Let's give it a shot. So that's what I started to do. And I wanted to test myself. I wanted to get way outside that comfort zone because, that's where life begins, at that edge of the comfort zone. If you can get there, you really can have a great life. So my first foray to Everest was on the north side in Tibet in April of 2006. Yeah, these two pictures, they're actually 2 days apart. One on the left, it's a beautiful day. That's the Mount Everest, of course, with the plume of weather coming off the top. We're approaching the North Col. We're in what's called the Magic Highway. It's the East Rongbuk Glacier where George Mallory and Sandy Irvine went up. And I had no intention of summiting on that trip. I just wanted to get up close and say, yeah, do I really want to do this or not? I wanted to affirm that or not in my mind. And then the next day, 2 days later, we had to descend because the weather turned dramatically against us. And that's why I like to say, some days you have fun, some days you're building character. And the best days actually are both. You have fun and you build some character. Get out. After that, I went to Mount Kilimanjaro, again trying to progressively move towards my goal. Kilimanjaro, I think it's sensitive. That was winter of 2007. Oh, by the way, I started to say, because you guys, you probably thought the reason I wanted to climb Everest was to get a cache. Well, it really wasn't. Sorry to disappoint you. And on that Tibet one, I did get 3 caches. One was the first to find, which is kind of crazy, but because not that many people get up there, and so I was able to get there and have a first to find on that. And I got 2 others in Tibet on that trip. Kilimanjaro, I got 2 caches, including what was my 3rd highest. The one on Tibet side is my 2nd highest cache that I've gotten. And it's actually that picture there, it's a virtual on the summit of Kilimanjaro, which is at 19,000 plus feet. Those glaciers, unfortunately, this was in 2007, they've dramatically retreated, which we all can feel disappointed about worldwide. Things like that are happening. The bottom, that's the Barranca Wall. It's really the only time you really have to, on that trek, on the route that we did, have to actually use your hands along with your feet. Otherwise, it's just essentially a trek to the top of Kilimanjaro. Next. Then Aconcagua. Aconcagua is the highest peak. Steve's been up there, outside of the Himalayas. There's only 1 cache on the way up. It's now my 9th highest cache I've done. And we did it, as you can see, winter of 2011. So arguably, we're the highest people on the planet on that day because it's the highest point outside of the Himalayas. And it was it's a massive mountain, lots of wind, can be intimidating, but it's a great precursor to moving on because of its height. It's at 22,900 feet, so it's up there. Next. So, and I've done some climbing preparation. Now I've got to do the hard work in the gym, outside as well. You'll see that on the next one, but on this one in the gym. And fortunately, working at the Olympic Committee, we have fantastic facilities, so I was able to utilize those, dragging sleds up an inclined surface and etc. Next. And then this is outdoors. In fact, on the far right, that's my first ever selfie. That was in the winter of 2011 or 2012, winter of 2012 on Mount Democrat. A lot of you guys have done that one. So, but and there was nobody else around, so I had to do a selfie. So, and then again, dragging sleds and carrying heavy packs outside in all kinds of weather. I mean, that's to prepare for something like this, you have to replicate the conditions, and the best way you can do that is get up high in our mountains around here and get outside when it's really cold. As I would tell my wife, I'm headed up the mountains to suffer a little bit. And she would just roll her eyes and, yeah. But I wanted to put this quote up because Mark Jenkins is another great climber who says, there's grandeur in the endeavor, a common goal of magnificent difficulty with everyone sharing in the brief moments of pleasure and extended periods of pain. It binds the heart to heart more strongly than the rope itself, because Everest is so high and so indifferent, it calls upon every mountaineer at some point during the climb to rise to his or her better self. That's what I want to see. What's inside of what I have inside of me? Can I rise to that occasion? That person inside all of us who has unquestioned courage will sacrifice without doubt, will commit without complaint, will put life on the line. This is the answer to the inevitable question, why? Because the highest mountain in the world, Mount Everest, expects of you, demands of you to reach for the highest qualities in yourself. So that's really was my purpose. My reason was of doing it, to see if I could test myself to the ultimate. So we're off to Kathmandu, 36 hours away from Colorado Springs and lots of airplane changes. And I got my first cache there, and I think Karen and Lindsay have the same one. It's a travel bug right down that busy street on the right. You can note their high-tech internet system and technology there of all the wires. When you're at the airport, again, Karen and Lindsay have experienced this, you do the duffel shuffle and a bunch of people there are no lines, there are no queues, it's just, okay, we're boarding the plane, everybody's just mixing and matching. And of course, about half the number of people in this room fit into one of those little tuk-tuks, they call them, transportation modes in Kathmandu. You leave Kathmandu, you fly to Lukla, which arguably is the most dangerous airport in the world. On the left up there, you'll see the approach. That cliff face drops 2,000 feet into that valley, and then the runway's only 1,500 feet long, so you have to stop before you get to this wall where these people are taking picture of a potentially imminent disaster. So if you survive this, your chances on Everest are great. I mean, you've got a wonderful chance to summit Everest. But it's appropriate to name Tenzing Hillary Airport in Lukla, and everybody hopefully knows that. If not, use that as one of your questions. Who were Norgay Tenzing and Sir Edmund Hillary? Next. So you load up the yaks. Actually, at this point, they're called zoes. It's a cross between a cow and a yak. The yaks, it's too hot down there for them. They picked it up higher up on the mountain. But anyway, you load them up, start your hike. It's a 10-day trek into base camp from Lukla. You're passing all these prayer wheels. They're the people, the Sherpa people in the Khumbu Valley are descendants from the Tibetan Buddhists. They came over the pass about 500 years ago. And those stones there with the writing are called mani stones. They actually brought those with them from Tibet. Some of those are 300 and 400 and 500 years old, those stones. And there's only one path. I mean, it's like a lot of things in life. There's only one way to do it if you want to do it right. And that's the path there you can see on the bottom left. Everything that goes up there has to be carried in. Now there's a lot of helicopters that they use, which in some ways is kind of unfortunate. But you can see these porters, they're unbelievable. That guy's got that plywood, 4 sheets of it on his back, hiking up this, at 13,000, 14,000 feet with winds like crazy. These people are unbelievable that are in this valley. And you've got a few bridges to cross that are nice suspension bridges. And that's not Everest in the background, but you see magnificent peaks like that all the way through. Namche Bazaar is the largest village in the Khumbu Valley. I got another FTF there, which is, again, surprising. Somebody on a trek earlier in the season had put one out. And, of course, I spotted it and said, I got to go find this. But you can see it's a pretty sophisticated village with the stone steps. You can see how they've carved it out of the mountainside there, and they just stacked the houses up on the levels as they go up. That's our first view of Everest. This is our team here. There were 9 of us that were climbing, and there were 7 others that were trekking in, friends and family members, along with, and then a couple of our Sherpas were with us along. Everest is in the clouds back there. You really can't see it, but that was really our first chance to say, well, yeah, we're still a long way away, but we're getting closer. Next. And we talked about Sir Edmund Hillary, and everybody knows him, but it's the first person, along with Tenzing Norgay, first 2 people to summit Everest. But his true legacy is what he's done for the people in the Khumbu Valley. His foundation is built over 35 hospitals, schools, bridges. This is here's the old bridge down here. It used to wash out every 2 or 3 years, and they put in a nice, better bridge above it. That's the Kumjung School up there, one of the Hillary schools. Again, a couple of our ladies have been there. And that's his legacy. These young kids, their lives are immensely improved by what Sir Edmund Hillary and his foundation have done. Next. And during the hike, there's lots of different emotions and moments. Up in the upper left, there's, serenity. You're just hiking along. You got this grandeur around you, and you're all in your mind about all these thoughts, and it's wonderful. And then along comes on the far right here, what's called, or upper right, a yak train, we call it, and it's the yaks moving stuff up and down. And they have the right of way. I can promise you that. So your job is to get on the upper side of the trail and let them go by, no matter how many they are. You don't want to face. This is one here outside of our tents, just grazing, one of the ones that was moving our gear up there. And then there's a lot of introspection. These are Chortens, these stone memorials here. They're memorials to the people that have passed away on on Everest. They've built one for each of the climbers that didn't make it back. Next. There's caches at the biggest monastery in Tengboche. In fact, that's Lama Geshe. He's passed away, unfortunately, since then, but he gave us our blessing, put a kata scarf around us, gave us a little poem that he had written out in the Tibetan Buddhist language, and blessed us and our gear. And the Sherpas, actually, they won't go beyond this point. If they don't get the blessing of the Lama, they're done. Because to them, Everest is the mother goddess of the earth. And she can either smile upon you or she can be have a lot of retribution. So they want to get this blessing. That's up on the ridge above Tengboche, looking down in the upper left. That's where a cache is up there. Again, Our Ladies have it, so that they had a good time getting it. And then there's a cache where I'm standing here taking this picture back at the base camp. Base camp is right along this glacier here, the Khumbu Glacier. You can maybe see a few tents right there if you get really close. But that's on a peak called Kalapatar, which means black rock in the Sherpa language. And you can get a great view of the whole range. Everest, Lhotse, Nuptse, the three major peaks in that range. And then that's base camp on the right. Our tent set up there. You're on a glacier. You can see the rocks everywhere. You can see the ice as well. And it cracks, and it's like snap, crackle, pop, the old cereals. And the first few nights, it's a bit disconcerting. And it's like, okay, I'm hearing stuff. Is it moving? And about once a week, we'd have to redo our tents, get the stones and move them around and set them back up on their platform because the glacier will have moved enough. Next. And at night, there is no light pollution, so as you can imagine. Those lights you can see this is in the Khumbu Glacier. These are people going up through the glacier here. That's their headlamps. But, of course, that's the Milky Way. And if somebody wants to ask a question later, ask one about seeing stars, okay? Just say seeing stars as a question, and that'll be a good one. I'll talk about it. If your dreams don't scare you, maybe they're not big enough. And again, one of the things we used to preach to our athletes. So, a lot of people know this, but some don't. You don't just climb up Everest. You're at base camp at 17,500, so it took us 10 days to get here. Then once we're here, we rest a few days. Then we go up through the ice fall, take some gear up, set up Camp 1, come back and spend the night, venture maybe a little bit up into the western Khum, which is that valley there between 1 and 2, come back to base camp. 3 or 4 nights, Camp 1, Camp 2, set up, drop some gear, come back down, 1, 2, 3, same repeat, come back down. Finally, you're ready for the summit push. Next. And so the training keeps going. I mean, just because you're there, like I say, 3 or 4 days, you need stuff to do, so it's always good to keep training. I brought some of my gear here if you're interested in looking. The big Everest Malay boots with the crampons, the beautiful Kermit the Frog suit, which you need it. But I got a good deal on that because they couldn't sell it. It was so ugly. So I said, I'll buy it. I don't care. If I have orange gloves, green suit, red shoes, fashion is not important to me. Anyway, this is practicing across the ladders. And so another question, if somebody wants to ask, to get in is ask me about training on the ladders. All right, into the Khumbu icefall. So I purposely offset this because the icefall moves about 1 meter a day downward, the glacier does. So it's every time you go through, it's a little different. And the only way to cross some of the crevasses, now when Hillary and those guys did it, they carried them with them, put them across, anchored them across, pulled them up, moved on to the next. Now, fortunately, each season they have a group of Sherpas called the Icefall Doctors, and they set them up and maintain them so people like me can get across them. But we have a video here to show crossing one of the More icefall photos. Again, you can see a lot of times the ladders have to get lashed together because it's far enough across. So, and every year they're different. I mean, when we did it, there was about 28 to 30 different crossings. 2 years ago, there were 7. So you never know. I mean, it just depends on how the glacier and the crevasses open up. And sometimes it's one single ladder, sometimes they're lashed together, etc. And it's always moving, as you can see. And this is probably the most objective danger on the whole mountain, because if it moves and a big serac falls over and you're there, it's sayonara. Next. More. This is my Sherpa here in the tan pants, Finjo. More about him later. He's one of the great human beings on the earth, to say the least. Next. So now we are up at Camp 1, looking into the Western Coombe. Coombe is CWM, a funny name. It's a Welsh word, means big valley or wide valley. And that's what it is, because that's Lhotse in the background, 4th highest peak in the world. Nuptse on the right, Everest on the left with the big plume off the top. You still got to go across, obviously you can see glaciers, but they're not steep. It's more of a gradual climb from 1 to 2. That's our tent set up there, and then 2 other groups on the other side of a little crevasse there with their tents. So Alan Arnett. Alan's actually from Fort Collins. Some of you guys may know Alan. He's probably the best chronicler of Everest and the Himalayas alive today, and writes some great podcasts, or has great podcasts, writes some great stories about it. But he says, to summit Everest, you must find that one reason, and it's unique and personal to you. Perhaps no one else will understand your reason, and that's okay. Because at 27,000 feet, with harsh winds, unbearable cold, beating against your goggles, there's no one else. You're alone on the mountain in your own world, fighting your own demons. And if you don't know why you're there, you probably won't summit, or maybe not come back. And again, this is true in life. All hard things, there's 1,000 reasons, there's 1,000 excuses why I can't do that. Oh, I can't do that. Why not? Is it impossible, or is it just really hard? There's 1,000 reasons why you can't, but there's one reason why you can, and that's inside you, each of us. This is Camp 2. It's what they call advanced base camp, because stage everything for the upper part of the mountain there. You can see the oxygen canisters in the background on the top right there. This is our camp here with the American flag, of course. Looking out from my tent. You can see that storm brewing up. We actually ended up on our summit push spending an extra couple of nights here, because the storm wasn't predicted, but the mountains, they make their own weather. It came through, so the jet stream goes across. Everest is high enough that it's in the jet stream. And so the reason that mortal humans can only climb it a couple of weeks a year is when the monsoon pushes up from the Bay of Bengal, it pushes the jet stream off of Everest into Tibet. And for a couple of weeks, the winds come down from 200 miles an hour to 25, 30, 40, which is reasonable for climbing. And if it comes back, once it's back, the season's over. So this storm came, we were nervous, but fortunately it didn't impact it. We still had a good summit option coming up 2 days later. Next. And this is the Lhotse face. We've been looking at this. We came up to it, looked up the Western Coombe. We thought, wow, that looks steep and icy and hard. Well, it's worse than that. Really, once we got on it, it's like, oh my goodness. So you can see how it's hard ice. It's just frozen. It's that upper part of the glacier that you can see here in the bottom left that comes down and then into the Western Coombe. And then obviously you've got to have a lot of protection to make sure you successfully handle that. Next. Here's Camp 3, literally hacked out of the side of Lhotse Face, 23,500 feet, just below what they call the death zone. And that's purposely set there because you can still stay there and not be dying. If once you're in the death zone, your body just can't regenerate. I mean, at the cellular level, you're essentially you're dying. So you have to move quickly in the death zone. So you go just below it for your last camp, your last official camp, and then you have Camp 4 afterwards. But anyway, this is us on the Lhotse face. And this is something else that I always talked about and preached with the athletes and others, but finally really experienced it tremendously myself. This is on the movement from Camp 3, the upper left. We're coming up from those tents way down there in Camp 3 up towards Camp 4 and across a band of rocks called the Yellow Band. They're different. They're sedimentary, and that's because this used to be Everest used to be on the ocean floor, got pushed up when the Indian plateau pushed up against Indian subcontinent pushed up against the Tibetan plateau. But anyway, and I'm coming up, oh yeah, Yellow Band, yeah, I've been here. Wait a minute. No, I haven't. I've never been here. But I'd visualized it so many times. I'd read so many books. I'd seen so many photos and studied so many maps. It was like deja vu. This will be no problem. I've been here. I've done that. I can do this. And that's, again, very important when you're looking at a very difficult, challenging goal or dream, is to be able to visualize yourself actually accomplishing it. Next. So that's Finjo upper right there. Like I said, one of the great humans on Earth. And I know that because of the way it works, and there's lots of ways you can do Everest, lots of options on how you do it. I wanted to do it what they call the classic way, which is you and a Sherpa, like Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. So what they do is they match you with a Sherpa. I had to fly to Seattle months before I left, do a psychological survey, do some testing on my skills, all that. And then they match you up, and they matched me up perfectly with Finjo. Finjo, I know when he got the assignment and we met in base camp, he goes, oh, I got to get this guy up Mount Everest. Man, I got the short straw. But we were up and down, as I showed before, several times. And on this rest break, we were just getting some fluid and some food in us. And then Finjo was, okay, let's go. And just as he was helping me up with his hand, he says, by the way, Doug, you're climbing very well. Tomorrow we summit. And I was like, I get chills telling you guys about it now, but this guy 6 weeks ago, I'm thinking, there's no way. But because of the way he took care of me, I was the oldest in our group by 16 years. And so I'm the slowest. So they would always have a little powwow and say, okay, tomorrow we leave at 3:30 in the morning, take off. You got to get through the icefall when it's still dark, so it doesn't move a lot. And Finjo would never, 2 o'clock, Doug. It's like, okay, 2 o'clock, we're up, we're the first ones out there. Because I'm the slowest guy, I'm the oldest, I'm the slowest. And they'd always catch us and pass us. On this day, we left, everybody else was leaving at 7 from Camp 3, we left at 5:30. And nobody had caught us. And you're climbing well, tomorrow we summit. It's like, the other thing he did was the last pass through the icefall, we had just a single ladder, not one of the lashed together, but like from me to Benji, about that far across the crevasse. And Finjo always led, which is the more risky way to do it. And then he would belay me coming across, and so I was safer. But he steps aside and says, Doug, you go first, Sherpa style. And I'm like, oh. And again, it's like having a great teacher or a great coach. They believe it. He was like, this guy actually believes I can do this stuff. And so it really inspired me. And that's what a great coach or teacher or person will do for you, is make you do it. So here's another great Alan Arnett quote. My right foot slips caused me to swing across the vertical rock wall at 23,000 feet. Smooth rock above, death below. As I settle against the wall, I look up and I look back down. Do I turn back? Do I quit? Is this impossible, or is it just really, really hard? And that's the ultimate question. We all face it at times, and climbing is okay, is it time to turn back or not? But it's other parts of life too. Is this task, is this assignment, is this goal, is it impossible? Or is it just really, really hard? And we just need to keep plugging away at it. Next. So then you come into Camp 4, at the South Col, in between Lhotse and the fourth highest peak and Everest, the highest peak. You've just crossed over here, which is Geneva Spur, and you walk into this camp. Now, I know a lot of you guys have camped. If you want to have one of the most miserable campsites in the world, I recommend the South Col. Because the winds just howl through there because it's a saddle. And that's why there's no snow there, it's just blown it all off. And so we rolled in there about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to leave at 8 o'clock that night to go for the summit. So, you're told, get some sleep, get some food, get some water, or get some hydration. And it's impossible to do any of those. I mean, sleep for sure, no way. Just sit there with a 1,000-yard stare looking at everybody. And by that time, we're 3 in a tent because, it's hard to get resources up there. And you're just looking at each other and you're trying to sip water and you're trying to eat something. And it's a miserable campsite. But now you're getting ready to head to the last summit bed. Next, Benji, okay. So this picture was taken from, not by me, from Lhotse, but it gives you a great look at the last part of the climb. South Col, here's the tents, down here the camp. You go across this snowfield, that's called the triangular face. As you can see, it looks like a triangle. So it's a mixture of rock and snow, which is the one mistake I made on training, was I didn't train enough with my crampons on rock, because a lot of times you're on rock with them, and those spikes are not as good on rock as they are on snow. You reach the balcony, a somewhat level spot, trade out your oxygen bottle, get some hydration, get some food, onto the south summit, the hill reach step, the cliff from the top. And there's no shortcuts to any place worth going. If you have a big dream, if you have a real goal, there's no shortcuts. If you think there is, not the way life is. And we'll talk about the death zone. This is Ed V. Stewart, one of the great mountaineers, American mountaineers of all time. You must stay mindful that you're now in the death zone above 24,500 feet, and acclimatization is impossible. Your body is dying. The idea, get up and back down fast enough that you don't have a chance to die all the way. It's climbing on borrowed time, and you got to be extremely careful that you don't run out. You don't run the clock out. And this is another, you can see just the upper part here, from the balcony at the bottom, the south summit. Just before the south summit is a step people don't talk about called the Tenzing step. Not as tough as Hillary, but pretty tough. The south summit, drop down, then back up, Hillary step in the top. Next. And so there's no pictures from that, from leaving camp. We left at 8 o'clock at night, and I had a little point and shoot, so no pictures until the next morning. That's the sun, that's the shadow of Everest, with the sun coming up behind us, obviously, as we're going up the ridge. That's my teammate, John Badee, coming up behind me up the Tenzing step. And at this point, people say, is Everest harder physically or mentally? And I say, yes. It's both. And at this point, it's truly mind over matter. If you don't mind, then it just doesn't matter. You just keep going. Next. And Scott Brzezinski is the first guy, there's been one more now since then, that did a walk in space, a spacewalk, extravehicular activity, and summited Everest. And he says leaving the tent at Camp 4, the South Col, is like an extravehicular activity in space. It's dark, there's stars everywhere, you're covered with protective clothing head to toe, you're tethered to a rope, you're going into the void. There are physical threats around you that are not dissimilar to being in space. One bad decision can be fatal. Cold, hypoxia, remoteness from rescue, ever present. And this is approaching that Tenzing step we were talking about. Next. And again, just like you guys have seen the Olympic Games, I know, those races are decided by tenths, hundredths of a second. The margin from gold to bronze to not medaling at all, razor thin. Somebody shoots the goal at 3 millimeters and it goes off 1 millimeter to the left, it goes in. Razor thin margins. And it's not how strong you are, it's how well you prepared to handle those situations. So this is the summit ridge here. And 10,000 feet down into Tibet on the right, 8,000 feet down into Nepal on the left. Next. The Hillary Step is really the crux of the climb. And it's a 40-foot rock wall. A lot of you guys here in Colorado, 40-foot rock wall, not a problem. At 28,450 with all this gear on, including the spikes, with a third of the oxygen you would have at a sea level situation. I mean, I desecrated Sir Edmund Hillary's memory, I promise you that. I'm using elbows, knees, anything I can to get up this thing. And it is as challenging as advertised for sure. Mahatma Gandhi, strength does not come from physical capacity, it comes from an indomitable will. And that's where it is at that point. It's really, am I going to do this? I got to keep going if I'm going to do it. I've got to get past this, the Hillary Step. Next. And now you're on the summit ridge. And, mountaineering is very simple. I mean, it's not easy, but it's simple. One step in front of the other, don't fall. I mean, that's the drill. And once you top the Hillary step, and this is looking back down at the summit ridge, with me taking the photos looking back down, and I can see the summit, and it's like, I don't know if I can make it, but I can take one more step. Take a step, 3 or 4 deep breaths. I don't know, but I can take another step, and that would, for an hour, the last hour, that's literally what it was, and then there are no more steps, and you're on the top. So after decades of dreaming about this, years of preparation for it, months of planning, weeks of pain, days of climbing, hours of waiting, I'm only on the top for 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes. And there's a reason for that too. One of them is, and you can see a cardinal sin here in this picture, if you look at my hands holding up the flag, it was windy. It was about, the air was about 25 below, the wind was about 30 to 35, so you're talking 60-degree wind chill. But I couldn't get the flag, so I took my gloves off to hold it up, literally frostbite like that. And also the one mistake I made on my gear was my goggles. I had these goggles that are called anti-fog. They have a little battery that blows across the face, because I have to wear my glasses. We'll hear that when we talk about crossing ladders, but my eyesight's not good. So, but they're not anti-freeze, they're anti-fog, not anti-freeze. So what would happen is they would slowly but surely come in, and I go, okay, I got to clear them off, take off my outside gloves, scrape the ice, put them back on, okay, continue on. 45 minutes, hour later, here we go again, scrape off the ice. So anyway, that was a mistake. Didn't cost me the summit, but I since have prescription goggles. Next. So, going to Disneyland, a lot of fun. There's a lot of things in life that are fun, but there's also stuff that doesn't have to be fun to be fun. Working hard, achieving a lifetime goal, putting yourself to the ultimate test, that can be fun too. So it doesn't have to be fun to be fun. And this is again Ed V. Stur's quote, getting to the top is optional, getting down is mandatory. And that's what I promised my family. I'm coming back, guys, so beware. And so on the way down, my hands are froze, really cold. I didn't know they were frostbitten at that point. I knew they were really cold. And because I had taken off my goggles so many times, and obviously this is my good eye, my left, this one's blind, the wind was just pounding. Every time I take them off, the wind just hammering this side. So my cornea froze. So I'm getting blurred vision. Well, Benjo's nervous because blurred vision is one of the signs of cerebral edema. So I said, okay, I'll take some Dimox, and but I'm telling you, it's my eye, it's not my brain. But anyway, I did that, and so I've got to get down. I've got to just singularly focus. The whole time you're really in the moment. You're really focused on the task at hand, the next step, the next, protection point, the next whatever. But in this case, for sure, with the cold hands, really tired legs, blurry vision. I needed to reach down to some place I'd never been before, somewhere I've never felt, do something I'd never achieve, and that's get back down. So this is Camp 4 down here where we got to get down to, and then we got to cross again the Geneva Spur, pack up Camp 3, and then that's Camp 2 way down in the valley there to get all the way down. So as we start down, I tell Finjo, we're going to have to stay another night at Camp 4. He's like, no, Doug, are you sure? I said, Finjo, and the thing about the Sherpas are, and this is great and terrible, is they will not contradict the Westerner. And this is what's happened a lot of times where the Westerner says, we're going to the top, and the Sherpa says, no, the weather's coming, we have to turn back, and the Westerner says, no, well, I didn't come this far not to make the summit, we're going. And they get in trouble, and the Sherpa along with the person passes away. So Finjo, I said, Finjo, I'm sure the Lhotse face will be too difficult. I've got to get some rest, I've got to get hydrated, I've got to treat my eye, got to get my hands warm. We just can't do it. So we spent a second night. So we were literally, we were on oxygen, thank goodness, so that helps. But we were in the death zone for 42 hours total. Next. But back down through the Khumbu ice fall, and in my humble opinion, I felt like I had the mental toughness to push myself to the absolute physical limit. This is going into base camp. 60 Minutes Australia, you can look it up online. They have a video. They happened to be filming stuff at that time, and they filmed me, of course. And this is a pretty big step up into the medical tent, and I can't even get so they helped me get up into the medical tent. And they treat my eye, treat my hands, and it's all good. Meanwhile, my team back at the Colorado Springs, at the training center, they put this up. We're on the 5th floor of our building. And so while I'm on Everest for 2.5 months, not quite 2 months and 1 week, they took the stairs instead of going the elevator to work, to lunch, back to home, etc. So yeah, that was their little effort to be part of the climb. Next. And then once you hike out of base camp, all of a sudden it's spring. It's like, when did this happen? The yaks have had their babies. The flowers weren't even leaves on these trees. Now there's flowers on these rhododendrons. And then here's proof positive. You don't need a gym. You don't need a pool. You don't need a track. If you want to be an athlete, here's a little Sherpa kid. He's got a rock outside his house, outside his hut. And that's his playground. And that's the beauty of it. The real measure of success or failure of the climber to triumph, not over a lifeless mountain, but over himself. That was Sir John Hunt, who led the expedition with Tenzing and Hillary summiting. Next. So I'll leave you with this. There's doors out there that are waiting for you to open. There's thresholds that you can cross. I promise you Mount Everest is not for everyone, but for everyone there is an Everest that can be sought. Dream big, plan well, work hard, and I wish you namaste in that quest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. That was amazing. We will take questions. Before I forget, I want to just give a thank you and credit to my brother-in-law, Philip Yunian, who is doing the sound and video. He is co-owner of a company called Productive, which does live sound and audio-visual and all sorts of stuff for events, corporate events in Denver. So if you ever have need of this kind of a recording professionally done, look up Productive.